Fantastic. Well, hi everybody. I hope you're enjoying the session on our course this week about gut health and mood in particular. And this is just really super actually to be joined by Svetlana, otherwise known as the Cheese Lady, from the town of Haddington, which is near Edinburgh in Scotland. Hi Svetlana.
Hi Lucy, lovely to be here.
Yeah, really great that you can join us, and just really looking forward to being able to, well, I guess do what we've done quite a bit before together, is just really share the health benefits of cheese, and a really great extra bit of content for the course as well. Thank you. So a little bit about Svetlana. You have a wonderful award-winning cheese shop in Haddington. You're so passionate about what you do, and you're a real expert as well. I know you judge, you do some judging as well, yeah, it's just going to be really exciting tonight to talk about how cheese truly nourishes us. And I'm very lucky Svetlana has sent me a wonderful selection of cheeses that we're going to be tasting together as we go as well. So yeah, I think we've always really enjoyed talking together about general health benefits of cheese, and it would be interesting to talk about mental health aspects as well tonight, and also sustainability, because all the cheeses that Svetlana sells in your shop, they are artisan and farmhouse cheeses, which I know is something we're going to really get you to tell us more about as we go on. So I think what we'll start with maybe is if we can just have a taste of this lovely goat cheese that I've got in front of me. I've been sitting here for a little while getting ready for this session, and I can't wait much longer to taste them. Well, yeah, and then we're going to start, I think, by generally talking about the health benefits of cheese, and then a little bit later on we're going to really get going on the gut health aspects. So do you want to, Svetlana, just talk us through this Valencé, this wonderful goat cheese we've got here?
Hi Lucy, thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited to talk about this very important topic.
Yeah.
And before I introduce you to the cheeses, I do want to echo what you just said. My whole premise of what I do and what I believe in my business and in life is that fine cheese is good for you. It's good for your body, it's good for your soul. Of course, when enjoyed in moderation, like everything else, but it is absolutely most definitely good for you. And I love talking about the health aspects of cheese at any opportunity I get. So this is a great one today. So the first cheese that I would like to introduce you to is the Valencé. So Valencé is one of the most classic goat's milk cheeses from the Loire Valley in France. It is made with pure and raw goat's milk, a lovely pyramid shape, as Lucy is demonstrating, and it's coated with vegetable ash on the outside, and that's what creates its kind of striking grayish mold on the outside, whereas inside, when we cut the cheese, we'll see that it has a very snowy white paste, and it's nice and creamy on the palate. So the rind is edible, and it will add to the flavor. Wow. Inside, you'll find this delicious, dense, but nice and creamy on the palate, like I say, paste that just melts. Full of herbaceous notes, nice and creamy notes, and very, very complex and lingering. And since we're talking about health benefits of cheese, and just maybe we'll be talking about the composition of cheese, I think goat's milk cheese is absolutely amazing. Some people shy away from them, and I do like to reintroduce them with a kind of a more open-eyed approach, so to speak. But I'd like to highlight some of the benefits of goat's milk cheese in particular. Goat's milk is very easy to digest. It is the lightest out of the three main types of milk. So there is goat's, cow's, and sheep's milk, and goat's milk is the lightest in terms of fat content. And not only that, the fat globules are a lot easier to digest. So they are very easy on your tummy and very easy to enjoy. The flavors can be quite herbaceous. Some of them can be a little bit of kind of farmyardy flavor, but they do vary. Not all goat's milk cheeses are the same flavor. They can be made in different styles. A lot of French ones will be small and creamy, whereas if we go to different countries like the Netherlands and even Britain, we'll find firmer goat's milk cheeses that will be made in a different style, like a Gouda or cheddar, and they will have completely different flavors. They will be more nutty, kind of maybe earthy sometimes. But yeah, they can be made in different varieties.
Yeah, it's really truly delicious. I couldn't wait any longer. I just sneaked a little bit there, but so delicious. And it's really interesting. Something you and I have talked about quite a bit before is this business with the fat content, and how goat's milk has the sort of lowest fat content, I think, of most cheeses, but also in general in cheese. It's a great little bit of myth busting, really, isn't it? That you and I now know that the fats in cheese are, even those saturated fats, are healthy fats. So those, what they now call those ruminant fats. And whereas before, maybe a decade or so ago, we used to really worry about the saturated fat in dairy and cheese, and worry about it maybe connected with heart health, all these issues, I guess, that were never very well researched. And now we know so much more, and we know that actually, as you so well put, that fat in goat's cheese in particular, but also generally in cheese, has been shown now to be protective for our heart health, which is just fantastic. And also, you know, I know we've talked before when we've been doing a cheese tasting, that it's got such beautiful, rich flavors when you buy such lovely quality cheese, that you really don't need very much. A little bit goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. When you compare this quality of cheese with something you can buy out of supermarket, I mean, the evidence is clear. We have so much more flavor here. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and the other thing actually that is really interesting just to mention, not necessarily to do with gut health, but really interesting for people on the course, is the protein as well in goat's cheese tends to be more what we call the A2 protein. I think that's right, isn't it? Or in fact, yeah, mostly A2 protein, whereas in a lot of the sort of regular cow's milk dairy that you'll buy, cow's milk that you'll buy in the supermarket, it tends to be mainly what we call A1 protein, and A1 protein can be harder to digest, whereas A2 is much easier to digest. And I always love to mention that, because I think a lot of people maybe wrongly feel that they might be intolerant to lactose in milk, when actually it may be this different protein, because the symptoms can be very similar.
Yes,
so,
I couldn't agree more. And it's always worth digging in. I hear a lot of people coming into the shop here and saying to me, oh, I can't have cheese. And then I start to kind of query, do they know really why they can't? What were they told? And they say, oh, they didn't tell me, or the doctor didn't tell me. I say to them, you know, it's worth actually finding out, because there are different things going on in cheese and in milk. So it's worth finding out whether it's lactose, whether it's protein, and then there are different things you can do. But I like to share this story. It's a personal story. I have a daughter who's 5 years old now, but when she was a baby, unfortunately, she couldn't have my milk, nor could she have formula. It was making her very ill. And that was a normal cow's milk formula. We've tried many different ones. And eventually, against advice of our GP, we decided to go on the goat's milk formula. And that was life-changing. It was like a completely different baby. Her rash cleared away. She was less gurney. She was just absolutely happy. So whatever it was, the GP couldn't explain it, and they didn't know any better, so to speak. But for us, it worked. So yes, there's something about goat's milk. Maybe it's not been completely researched in every every single aspect, but it worked for us. So I can definitely share that story.
That's a fantastic story, because I know there's a lot of mothers who, you know, they are advised to restrict dairy if there are issues, but actually to know that there is a difference. And sheep's milk as well is another interesting one. But I think wow, that's really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem. So I hope we'll encourage more people to explore goat's milk cheeses. Yes, they may be a little bit unusual flavor-wise, but like I say, there are different styles, different flavors. So do have a try of as many as you can get your hands on. Ask your monger for advice.
Yeah, and I think with goat's milk as well, the best way to have it is as cheese. I have to say I find it hard to have it in any other way. I've tried goat's milk kefir, which you'll know about, and I don't particularly like it, but I love goat's cheese, and it's also so versatile. There's so many different things that we can do with it as well. It just adds a lovely instant flavor. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's very versatile. At home you can have it on a cheese board, you can cook with it. There are so many different things you can do.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm going to taste another little bit, but also it's lovely that you can just eat the rind.
Yes, all of it is edible, and yes, it will bring a little bit extra to the flavor when you eat the rind. The ripe of the cheese gets the rind sometimes make it stronger, so it just depends on the ripeness of the cheese.
It sort of adds to the texture as well, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So while we're just still talking about the sort of general aspects of the health of cheese is actually one of the best sources of calcium of all dairy, isn't it? And most people, I think, know that dairy is a really good source of calcium, but it's particularly it's been shown to be particularly good from cheese. And I'm pretty sure that the research says that that's because of the protein in cheese, which helps us to absorb the calcium. So the protein is in all dairy. It's a particular type of protein, but in cheese, it's a more concentrated form of that protein. And so maybe that's why it's really helping us to absorb the calcium, because we know that the particular protein in dairy helps us to absorb calcium from it. So there's some great research in France I was reading actually that was showing that cheese is just one of the best sources of calcium for children when they're growing. So yeah, it's win-win.
It is a win-win. And actually what a lot of people don't realize, of course, cheese comes from milk, but it's also partially digested milk, because when we make cheese from milk, we start the breakdown of the lactose. That's the first step of the cheese making process. The sugars, we add lactic acid bacteria, and they start to break down everything, and then the proteins start to break down and the fats start to break down. That's why it's actually an easier food to digest for our bodies. So that's why children can probably digest it better. And yes, there are so many fantastic things packed into every piece of cheese. Like you mentioned, there is a little bit of fat, there's definitely a lot of protein, and traces of lactose. We can touch on that on more detail, because I think it's a very important and interesting aspect. And what we can see, well, even more microscopic, is all the different vitamins and minerals that are hiding in there, and they're just absolutely amazing. And the better the quality of the milk that goes into making cheese, the more of that good stuff is retained.
Yeah, and I think that's always a really great thing to remember when we're talking about the fat content of any food, but particularly of cheese, that those really health-giving fat-soluble vitamins are in the fat. So, you know, that's another thing not to be concerned about when we're thinking about the fats that are in cheese. Let's just pick up on the lactose then, Svetlana, because that's, I think, am I right that goat's cheese is also a bit lower in lactose anyway?
Well, yes, goat's milk cheese is lower in everything.
Okay.
So if we had a kind of a scale, goat's milk cheese would be the lightest in terms of fat, lactose, protein. It has less of everything.
Okay.
Cow's milk is in the middle, and sheep's milk is the richest. That's why it's also so amazing for you. So yes, goat's milk is the lightest in lactose and everything else. But if we were to have this discussion around lactose, I think it's very interesting. And a lot of people misunderstand And they think that because cheese is made from milk, automatically it will have the same amount of lactose as milk, which is not really a fact. So like I was saying just a few minutes ago, when we start making cheese, we need to break down the lactose to be making cheese. So what the cheesemaker adds to fresh milk is lactic acid or starter cultures, lactic acid bacteria, and they start to break down the lactose in the milk. So depending on the style of cheese that we're making, some lactose may be retained, but it will be traces. Whereas, so that's for soft cheeses. But if we're making firm and hard cheeses, a lot of that lactose, first of all, is digested, and second of all, is also washed out with curd.
Right.
So, yeah. First of all, we basically digest lactose by adding lactic acid bacteria. So that's the first step. The second step, we cut the curd and therefore we wash out whatever is left there with whey. So that's washed out, and we have curd left, the solids of the cheese. Then these solids get formed and placed in different forms. And when the cheese goes into a maturation room for its long maturation process, whatever is also retained in the final cheese also gets broken down. So if you want a cheese that's naturally lactose free, you would go for the hardest and the most mature cheese. So if somebody is not sure, maybe lactose is their problem with cheese, I would start by tasting something like a vintage Gouda.
Yeah.
So for instance, our vintage Gouda is matured for over 4 years. Wow. So that's a very, very mature cheese.
Yeah, yeah.
And therefore, there will be virtually no lactose left in that wheel of cheese. Amazing. So if you're not sure, try that. Slightly younger cheeses might be okay too, maybe like a mature Gruyere, mature cheddar even. So anything from that firm/hard cheese genre are good to try.
That's really great information. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good clarity. And it kind of helps us to maybe move quite nicely on to our next cheese, which is a firmer cheese, the Appenzeller from Switzerland, which, see, I was thinking this was quite mature. It's matured for at least 9 months. And now that sounds really young compared to what you've been talking about.
Well, with cheese, you actually have to put all things in perspective.
Yes.
It's not as easy as just comparing their age, actually, because we also have to remember the size of the cheese.
Okay.
The vintage Gouda I was talking about is 10 kilos, and it's really quite a big, thick wheel of cheese, whereas this Appenzeller is about 6. So it doesn't take as long for...
is that about half the size of the round?
Yes, Gouda is much bigger, much bigger.
Okay.
So yes, it doesn't take as long to mature Appenzeller as it would take to mature the Gouda. So it's all very relative.
Okay. And so I think it might be a really nice chance then to pick up on the story behind the cheese, how it's been produced in the first place, the lands that the cows were actually grazing on, because that's a really interesting point around sustainability even, and we touch on that a little bit in the course, but just to understand more about what you were talking about, Svetlana, with it really depending on the grass that the cattle have grazed, you know, where it is, the season, that really impacts the nutrition that then you're going to see coming through in the cheese. So maybe while I'm trying this Appenzeller from Switzerland, do you want to talk first of all? In fact, can I just ask you first of all, for the benefit of everybody, what is the difference between an artisan and a farmhouse cheese?
Okay, so our specialty at the shop, like you mentioned in the beginning, is only farmhouse and artisan cheeses. Some people use these terms interchangeably. However, there is a slight difference between them too. So a farmhouse cheese is the kind of cheese that's made by a farmer who has their own animals, cows, sheep, goats. So the farmer has the animals, makes their own cheese on the same kind of farm premises. That's farmhouse cheese. Artisan cheese is slightly different because the cheesemaker, they don't have their own source of milk. Therefore, they have to source milk but it has to be really good milk. So they go out to nearby farms and find the best milk they can find nearby, and that gets delivered to their cheese making facility, and then they make cheese. So in the first case, we own the whole process. In the second case, the cheesemaker has to source the milk. But the key is that the milk doesn't travel very far. It has to come from nearby farms, because that's how we retain the quality. That's how we don't necessarily have to pasteurize the milk. Some cheesemakers do choose to do that, but we don't have to if it didn't travel very far.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, and I should just say that these 3 cheeses that we're talking about tonight are all raw cheeses, and we'll maybe move on and talk a little bit about that just in a minute. But that mouthful that I've just had just now, I mean, you taught me actually to just keep the cheese in your mouth for a little bit before you even start chewing it, just to let all those flavors and the texture even come through. And it's just a punch of amazing, quite zingy flavor. I don't know the right words to describe it, but can you tell us a little bit about why that is with this particular cheese, and presumably to do with the Swiss Alps that the cattle are grazing?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Well, what first got me fascinated with cheese in general when I just got into this whole big subject, it was the fact that all of these cheeses that we sell and other farmhouse and artisan cheeses made with the same kind of raw ingredient, so to speak, milk. And if you look at milk, it all looks quite the same, but then somehow we end up with different cheeses. Yes, there's different recipes that cheesemakers use, but there's also something different about milk that can be used for making cheese. So in this case, when we go to Switzerland, virtually in our mind, we can imagine where this milk comes from. Swiss people are very, very particular about the quality of their milk and therefore their cheese. So a lot of the farmhouse and artisan cheeses are made with raw milk, and the quality of feed for their cows is paramount. So I was talking about the quality of this milk in my book. I'm sure we'll mention it in a few moments, but it's believed to be white gold, liquid gold. It is really, really so good. So they feed their cows as much as possible on a grass diet. So if they can take their cows into the Alps, which is during the summer, this is where they will feed. They'll have the most amazing grass, flowers, crystal clear water, and that all goes into the cow's system, and of course then comes out as milk. It will mean different things in terms of composition. There will be, as I've already mentioned, more vitamins and microelements in the milk, and therefore in the resulting cheese. But also the color of the cheese, if you look closely, Alpine cheeses will have this glow. They'll be quite golden.
Yeah.
And that is completely natural. Nothing is added. It's actually completely banned in Switzerland. The cheesemakers of Switzerland voluntarily ban any colorants and additives in their cheeses. But yeah, the color is natural, and that's from beta-carotene that is naturally found in grass.
Yeah, so beta-carotene being a type of vitamin A, which is so good for our immune systems, as apart from anything else. We all know about vitamin A for our eyesight, but great to boost immunity as well. And actually it's a fat soluble vitamin too, so we were talking about that earlier. Yeah, it's a lovely picture in my head, and I'm glad you mentioned your book. I have a copy of it right beside me here, and it's just I found it a really, really interesting read. And one of the bits that I love is when you talk about just the enjoying cheese together. You and I are having to do this virtually, and it would be so much nicer to be doing it with you in person, but I'm going to be enjoying this with the family after we finish this evening, and it's just a wonderful way to remind us to bring back the value of food in general, and you know, the precious systems that have produced this food and the hard work that's gone into it, and taking time to savor every mouthful, And again, I think that's another interesting concept, because it's helping us to slow down with our eating, and then we digest it better, and also perhaps we don't eat quite as much. So yeah, there's a lovely story all around cheese, actually, isn't there?
Absolutely. Well, you're
Yeah.
taking words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I would be saying. Proper cheese, farmhouse and artisan cheese, it just helps you to slow down, to save a life, to enjoy each other's company more, to get better quality of nutrition.
Yeah.
So all of those things. That's why I love what I do and I love our products. So
Yeah. And I think also, just reminded myself to mention that when we're thinking about gut health, we are all the while wanting to think about, obviously, lots of fiber and plants that we know drives our gut health, but also the food needs to be as natural as possible and as rich in nutrients as possible. And over the years, so much of the food processing that we've done is removing nutrients from the food, or the way farmers have been encouraged to farm using a lot of chemicals in farming is removing a lot of the goodness from the soil, and therefore a lot of the nutrition from our food. Whereas the artisan and farmhouse cheeses are just bursting with that real richness, that packed with nutrients, and really driving our health. So yeah, just another good point to mention. And really, when we talk about sustainability, it's got to be good for our health as well as good for, with food anyway, it's got to be good for our health as well as good for the land that the food is coming from. And presumably
100%.
with the artisan and farmhouse cheeses, they are also farms that are trying to farm as far as possible in line with nature.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
especially if we're thinking again about Swiss cheeses, it is very natural. Yes, they will have a rotation of where they can graze their cattle because they want to come back there next year. So
Yeah.
it's all about the regeneration of the soil and
Yeah.
whatever is growing. So it's extremely important to them. And throughout the summer, they actually move up the slopes of the Alps and they progressively feed up the Alps where they are. So it's just very, very natural. And it always makes me slightly kind of giggle when people ask me if these cheeses are organic. And I'm thinking, well, how much more organic can you get by making cheese in the Alps? They're naturally just so organic. I swear I've been to Switzerland a couple of times, but I've never seen anybody spray in the Alps.
Yeah.
Nasty.
Yeah, and you raise a great point though, because I think we do all get hooked on on labeling and what we read on the labels, and actually you're so right that there's a lot of food out there that hasn't got an organic certification because it's either impossible to get it, or it just doesn't relate to this kind of cheese because they just don't spray up in the Alps. And actually, even with organic food, as you well know, farmers can still use a certain amount of chemicals. So actually this kind of food is really beyond organic. It doesn't even, it's just farmed with in a beautiful way that is good for the land and good for our health at the same time.
Absolutely.
So what would your advice be if, I'm so lucky that I've ordered this cheese from you, and we'll say at the end how people can obviously do that or come into your fabulous shop. But if you for some reason don't have access to cheeses from a specialty shop like yourself, and all you've got is your local supermarket, is there a way to try and at least follow a few key sort of steps to try and get the healthiest cheese you can in the supermarket?
Okay, that's a very good question. Well, first of all, probably I'm just too tempted to say that we are so lucky to live in the 21st century, and by the magic of internet, we can just travel, and your cheeses can travel to you.
Yeah.
So if you can find a reliable online shop, they can certainly deliver cheeses to you. But if a supermarket is all you have and that's all you're prepared to use, then yes, well, I think maybe I'll take a step back and compare supermarket cheeses to our farmhouse and artisan cheeses, just to help with the understanding.
Yeah.
So I would call cheeses sold in supermarkets as industrial cheeses. So they're made on a larger scale, and the main difference is the quality of the milk. You won't be surprised to hear. And that's why I was very particular when I was explaining artisan cheese, that the milk has to travel not very far to arrive to the cheese making facility. Whereas with industrial cheeses now, milk can travel very fast distances. It can go all the way across the country, but of course they need to keep it safe. Therefore, before they can start making cheese, they need to pasteurize it and in some cases sterilize it. What does that do? It kills naturally occurring bacteria in the milk that also contribute to the flavor, and not to mention all the vitamins and microelements found in the milk. So they start with a very, very kind of bland type of milk, and therefore the flavor is not really there when they're going to make cheese, and therefore those cheeses tend to be really salty. They do need to add some type of flavor to them by adding a lot of salt. Yeah, because people like salty things. That's one of our primary flavors that we are kind of all naturally drawn to. So therefore they oftentimes will be very salty. Or another thing they can add to supermarket cheeses is different additives like cranberries and, I don't know, walnuts and things like that, just to bring a little bit of flavor to the cheese. And therefore they're not quite as natural, and in some cases with really salty cheeses, not as good for you as farmhouse and artisan cheeses.
Of course, yeah.
But in supermarkets, you can find some artisan cheeses, at least. So cheeses like everybody will know, Gruyere, Comté, Ossau-Iraty, they can be actually found in supermarkets. And yes, they will be better than your industrial cheeses. However, the important thing to bear in mind is that they won't be as flavorsome as the ones you can buy in a specialist cheese shop, because oftentimes in supermarkets, they'll sell them very young. There has to be a reason why they are cheaper there than in a specialist cheese shop. And that reason is the age.
Okay.
It takes such a long time to mature cheese, and there's a lot of labor. A lot of them are kind of handled by hand, and they have to be turned around, they have to be brushed, and that all adds to the price, but therefore to the quality of the cheese. But yes, you can find some artisan cheeses in supermarkets, but they will be very young.
Yeah, and Gruyere is a great one to mention, actually, because I like that in cooking. You know, that's you get a lot of flavor from a Gruyere melted into a nice sauce. Or so what about sort of cheddars? I'm just going off topic a bit here, but just made me think while you were talking, we've got so many, you know, in the southwest, nearer to where I live, you know, we've obviously got the cheddar gorge, and we've got a lot of producers making their cheddar cheeses. So again, there must be a big difference between the sort of farmhouse cheddars and just a very standard cheddar in the supermarket.
So yeah, the cheddar in the supermarket would be called a block cheddar.
Yeah.
And it's made in a slightly or quite different way to your traditional cheddars. So traditional cheddars, not only different in the process of how they're made, but also in how they're matured. And part of that maturation process is that they're matured in cloth. They have to be cloth bound, and that allows the cheese to mature, to breathe during maturation and develop all of those lovely flavors. Where supermarket cheddars, they are made in blocks, and they're actually vacuum packed. So the maturation is not the same, let's put it this way. And there are also different other tweaks they can do to the flavor of the cheese. At some point, block cheddar producers realized that it's quite popular with the general consumer to have quite a fruity cheddar. So they've started using different starter cultures that are more native to other countries in Europe, like Switzerland, that produce more kind of fruity type of cheeses. So they've started using them in Britain to produce fruity cheddars that are kind of more popular with the general consumer. Whereas in the traditional cheddar, you would find completely different starter cultures, more native to our country. And therefore kind of more traditional. And they develop different flavors. In traditional cheddar, you'll find kind of sharp, tangy flavors, sometimes nutty and earthy. So all of those.
It's so good to know. And I really, your point about the salt is so important, because really, you know, the more artisan our cheese, the more natural it is. These flavors that I'm tasting, I wish everybody could taste them with me, are just absolutely divine. And yet then in those sort of it's the only way I can think to describe them, is the supermarket cheeses. They're adding the salt to try and get some kind of flavor, and of course then the salt not quite so good for our health as well. So
I have to say that salt, of course, is present in most of the cheeses. 99% of the cheeses probably, but yes, not in as bigger quantity. It will be there, it will be in the background, but yes, it's not gonna be overwhelming. And an interesting fact is, we're still talking about Swiss cheeses, they're naturally lower in salt content, because if we again think about the Alps and how they used to get there by horse, and to have to carry all of those wheels and everything that they took with them to go live in the Alps, they just didn't have enough manpower to bring salt.
Amazing. Right.
So therefore, they developed a slightly different process of cheese making. To make a firmer cheese, they started heating the curd. After cutting the curd, they draw the moisture out of it, and therefore they ended up with a firmer cheese kind of naturally.
Oh, you're just such a wealth of information. It's just so fascinating. So every time I'm with you, I learn something new. It's amazing. Okay, so let's move on to this Roquefort that I've got here, this blue cheese. Can I call it a blue cheese?
Of course.
To make sure I get my terminology right. So yeah, maybe we should try and focus a little bit more, thinking about the session of the course that this is going with as well. So thinking more about gut health again and mood. And one of the things that you talk about in your book, Svetlana, and you've also told me more about, is that cheese is such a good source of tyrosine, and tyrosine is important for our mental health. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, tyrosine is something that happens naturally in cheese during maturation. It's a type of amino acid, and with the breakdown of protein, that's what we end up with. And a lot of people actually confuse the little crystals in the cheese for salt, and those are actually those amino acids, the protein crystals.
Really?
So, and they are the ones that are responsible for making us happy. It's been scientifically proven that actually they do make us happier, they boost our mood. And yes, cheese is good for us, good for our mental health. That's why I'm so confident and happy to say that.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And also when we're boosting our own microbes inside us, that they also produce some of those amino acids, those building blocks that you talked about for our happiness hormone, serotonin. And so just really helpful to really look after our gut health when we're thinking about our mood. So let's just
say, sorry Lucy, sorry to interrupt, but like as we say, one of the main killers of our gut microbiome is stress. So I think if we can focus on something that makes us less stressed, and one of those things could be enjoying a nice plate of cheese every
I think that's a lovely
with your significant other, with your family, that is already a step in the right direction.
It's so good that you mentioned that, because actually a couple of sessions before this one, we on the course we talk about the huge impact of stress on our gut health. And you're so right, I am so far from stressed at the moment. Sitting here enjoying all these great flavors, so that's a lovely thing to bring in. And
that's why for me it's a must every Saturday in our house to have a cheese board. Well, it's not a huge cheese board, it's just for the two of us when the 5-year-old goes to bed, and we sit down with a glass of wine and we enjoy some cheese. And that's a good way to unwind, really.
So nice. And really you can have it as a lovely long way to enjoy food as well. That's what I love about eating cheese. It's quite a slow it's not like you're tucking into a plate of food in front of you. Somehow it encourages chat, and you can make the flavors in the food last a lot longer.
Absolutely, especially if you make a point of discussing them. What do you taste? Fruity? Do you taste smoky? Do you taste beef bouillon?
So let's just talk about the what a lot of people ask me about is the probiotics in cheese. So those good bacteria that it's always helpful to eat in order to boost our own microbiome. And this is something that, you know, I'm sure there's still a lot of research to come out about. And you know, I've talked about this before, and we're just sort of trying to understand it. But I think from what I've learned from you, Svetlana, is that the sort of general rule of thumb is that the younger the cheese, the higher its probiotic value. Maybe you want to elaborate on it a little bit.
In my understanding is that the probiotic qualities of cheese really start with the first step of cheese making. When the cheesemaker introduces the starter culture, which contains the lactic acid bacteria, and those are the ones that are with probiotic qualities, and whatever ones remain in the soft and blue cheeses, they are the ones that can help you to boost your gut microbiome.
Yeah. And so with this, so thinking about those microbes then, with this Roquefort, can you just talk us through how we get this blue coloration in there?
Well, Roquefort is one of my absolute favorite cheeses, and some people actually overlook it because they think, oh yeah, I can buy it in a supermarket and they'll be kind of same. I have to, if I may, maybe give you a little bit of understanding as to how Roquefort can be different.
Yeah.
So again, going back to our discussion, whether you can buy something in the supermarket, yes, you can, but Roquefort is made by 7 producers in the entire world, right? Wow. And few of them are huge. They're conglomerates. They are responsible for way over half of the entire market of Roquefort. And those are the ones you'll buy in a supermarket. They generally will come cut in small slices and vacuum packed, which affects the flavor quite hugely. Whereas in specialist cheese shops, you will buy one of other 5 producers, generally speaking, depending on the shop as well. In my shop, I like to stock, because it is my favorite, the Roquefort from the smallest producer. They're called Le Vieux Berger, and they're a really small enterprise. They're only 10 people working there. They're really small family-run enterprise, and therefore they do things properly, how it used to be done in the olden days. And at the moment, we actually have another Roquefort from Carden, and they are another small producer. So how do we get the blue mold into the blue cheese? That's a really good question. Well, back in the day, blue mold happened naturally just because of the kind of bacteria that was present in milk. And when the cheese was aging in, let's say, cellars, through the cracks on the rind of the cheese, the air would enter the inside of the cheese and the cheese would mold. Okay. So it happened very, very naturally. This type of bacterium, Penicillium roqueforti, can grow on rye bread. So for Roquefort, what they do is they get some lovely French baked rye bread, and they literally let it get invaded by Penicillium roqueforti. Oh. And then they can grind that when it's all dried out, and they can use that to add to the milk.
Wow.
There are other commercially produced strains of Penicillium roqueforti, then some will be completely kind of powder-like. But yes, that gets added to milk. And then what we need is some air during the maturation process. Some cheesemakers, as you know, will pierce the cheese as there won't be any natural cracks. And that's what allows the air to enter and blue mold to start growing and blooming.
Yeah. That's so interesting, and it's just worth mentioning when you so the cheese that I've ordered from you in the shop, you use this special paper with it's sort of lined.
It's duplex paper. I have to say it's not our usual paper what you have in your hand. We usually with our brand. Unfortunately, there's a paper crisis at the moment.
Yeah.
So we had to use an emergency stock.
Okay.
But yes, the most important thing is that whatever paper that we will use here at the shop, it will be a duplex paper.
Yeah.
And I also do talk about it in my book and the importance of it. The important thing is that the cheese during your keeping of it, storing of it in your fridge, is allowed to breathe but not suffocate. And this lovely paper, the duplex paper that has 2 layers, allows it to do just that. If you keep your cheese in the fridge in cling film, it will dry out if it's under wrapped. If it's over wrapped, it will suffocate.
Okay.
So there's this danger. The second best alternative to duplex paper, if you can't reuse it, is foil.
Okay.
So I've kind of figured that out from my testing, but yes,
okay.
If you can use duplex paper, that's the best.
And just sort of a practical tip, how long do you think we can keep cheese in the fridge? I mean, it must really vary depending on the type of cheese. So this fairly ripe goat cheese that we started off, presumably we want to enjoy that fairly quickly.
Okay, so depending on the ripeness, I'm going to be speaking about not overripe cheeses here.
Yeah.
If somebody sells you a cheese that they say this is ready to eat now, don't keep it, don't keep it. But let's say this cheese is not too ripe. So soft and blue cheeses, they can be kept for up to 2 weeks in your fridge.
Okay.
In a specialist paper because of their relatively high moisture content.
Okay.
Moisture in the cheese is kind of what tends to go off. The firmer cheeses like our Appenzeller and all of your cheddars and Goudas and anything else firm, they can actually keep in your fridge for up to a month. However, there's a caveat. Don't expect it to stay pristine, even in cheese paper. It's not magic paper. Farmhouse and artisan cheeses, they do have mold. They have molds growing on the rind on the outside, and that mold will want to invade the open surfaces of the cheese.
Okay.
It's completely natural.
Yeah.
But if you open your wedge of cheese that you kept for a month and never opened, and you'll see that it has a little bit of mold on the surfaces, it's not dangerous.
Yeah.
It's completely natural. You can just scrape the mold off and enjoy the rest of the cheese.
Okay. Yeah.
So
that's
I
good
hope that's
to know.
helpful.
Well, do you know, I could just talk about this forever. It's just really fascinating. There's so much to it. It's a very, it's quite a complex story to tell around cheese, I think. But yeah, I think we've hopefully summarized it nicely for everybody. You know, it is just artisan farmhouse cheese, just packed with goodness. We've talked about how the fats are healthy fat, goat's cheese being lower in fat and lower in lactose, and really great to get a bit of clarity from you earlier on about cheese being either very low in lactose or really has hardly any in it at all. And then we've touched on all the gut health aspects. So before we finish, please do just tell everybody how they can contact you, how they can order from you, how they can find out more from you. It's nice to share that.
Thank you so much, Lucy. So if you'd like to follow us on social media, we are the Cheese Lady UK, and please do, we do share lots of lovely cheese pictures, lots of tips about cheese. Then if you'd like to check out our online store, it's thecheeselady.co.uk, and you can browse all of our cheeses, hundreds of them on there. There are different filters you can use to narrow them down. You can sort them by country, by type of milk, and so on and so forth. And yes, we can deliver anywhere on the mainland UK. We'll send you cheese in a thermal pouch with ice pack, so everything nice and safe, and it'll arrive to you by courier. And if you're interested to learn more about cheese, and like Lucy mentioned, it's quite a complex subject. I did try to make it not too thick. This is for a general consumer. This is not for a cheese professional. This is for yourself to learn about cheese, how to enjoy it as part of a healthy, balanced diet. And yes, if you'd like to pick up my book, it's also on our website. It's also on Amazon. So have a look, and I hope you will read it and raise your level of appreciation of fine cheese. But the main message that I'd like to leave you with is, like Lucy says, cheese is good for you. It's good for your body. It's good for your health. And of course, when it's enjoyed as part of a healthy, balanced diet, it's just what's there not to love.
Oh, amazing. Well, I just think that's a perfect way to finish, so I'm not going to spoil it by talking anymore. But thank you so much, Svetlana. This has just been really great, and so appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You're welcome.